Precisely. Thank you. And now we'll broach that topic because folks are trying to dereference that URL, and that sounds to me like we have a volunteer for a note taker, since it's clearly open on your screen now. Could we impose on? I can try, but I don't want to be. Okay. Can we have a volunteer for a minute note taker, please? Paul and I did not prepare. Could someone please volunteer to be one of the several note takers we will have? Thank you, Mike. All right, I think we're ready to go. All right, man. All right, hi everyone, and welcome. It's Thursday, and you are here in the SAAG meeting. Thanks for joining us here in the room, and we're running a hybrid session. So welcome to those that have joined us remotely from wherever they might be. First thing we want to cover, of course, is something you've seen if you've been participating with us all week. Here is the relevant note well. If you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to ask Paul or I about that. I was remiss in introducing myself. My name is Roman Dinelio. I'm one of the SEC ADs, and sitting next to me is
Paul Wouters,
the other SEC AD. Next slide. Okay, so that there are many things in that note well. We would just like to reiterate what it means to live the code of conduct. Let's be courteous to our colleagues. Let's keep it on message on the technical things, and really remember why we're here to create solutions for the internet. Next slide. Again, as a reminder, we are in a hybrid meeting situation, so those are some quick best practices around using the technology, and a reminder that please wear your mask in the room unless you are actively speaking into the microphone. Next slide. We have a relatively tight agenda here around two key topics. First, we're going to do a quick summary of what's been happening in the area since we last got together, highlights in what's been happening this week or will happen this week. And then the second and the meaty of the two topics is Sophia Selly has graciously offered to summarize for us what's been also happening that's hot in the security area, quite relevant to us in Japan right now, which is the Real World Crypto Symposium. Pausing here, would anyone like to bash the agenda? All right, hearing nothing, let's move on. It's not coming up. Sorry, we're just having a hiccup where the slide looks right on the screen here, but it's not displaying correctly anywhere. No, there it is. So this security community here at the IETF really only works because folks are willing to volunteer and are willing to help, and that's what makes sure that the things we ship out of the IETF are secure, and we have secure solutions to deploy on the internet. And you can help out in a couple of different ways. Feel free to talk to us about it. If first, we always need some help with running and administratively, all the administrative processes for making our working groups successful. If you are interested in becoming a working group chair, please don't hesitate to reach out to us online. Tell us that, hey, I would like to be a working group chair. You can say things like, I would like to be a working group chair for a select set of topics. You can even tell us, I don't know if I'm ready to be a working group chair, but kind of keep me in mind, and how can I get to the point where I could be a working group chair?
And to add to that, we are really looking for working group chairs for some specific groups. So please, put your name in the box.
Well, Paul, I mean, are there specific working groups we should call out, or should we handle that offline?
We'll do that offline.
Okay, we'll do that offline. The other thing to kind of mention is that we just concluded the NomCom process, but the IETF is also always looking for who will be the future ADs of this organization. So if you are interested in becoming an AD, please don't hesitate to reach out to, again, Paul and me, to really just talk about what that means, what that experience is like, and how you can be better prepared to put your name into for consideration during the NomCom. Another very concrete way to help out is you can be a document shepherd. It's great when working group chairs shepherd those documents, but what works even better is if non-working group chairs are those document shepherds, and it's really a great way to learn about how that process works. And I can't really emphasize to you how helpful it is to the working group chairs and to the ADs when we have really well written and well shepherded documents helping us through all of that. Through that entire process. We will have stats a little bit later, but SEC, I think, is number 2 on the shame list of how big our backlog is related to errata. That is errata for open working groups and for working groups that have concluded. That's another way you can help with the process. And then lastly, we're always bringing in new work into the organization. Helping us vet ideas, especially at the BOFs, is really crucial to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the IETF. So if you want to talk about any of those, please don't hesitate to reach out or find ways to connect. We have a couple slides around administrative things. These are largely framed as what's been happening in the area since we last got together. So since last time we did these slides, we try to keep these metrics, we try to keep the same metrics. We've been fairly busy since the last time we got together. 4 new working groups have been created or reopened. So meeting for the first time and chartered since the last time we got together are SATP and PQIP. And then reopened are Jose and Radex. So that's 4 new working groups on top of the slightly over 25 that we already have now. We had 1 security area working group this time. This was on the topic of key transparency, key trans, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Wes was at the mic, so he was going to say something. Please. Okay. Next slide. We always ask that working groups drop the most significant things that they think the SAAG community wants to hear about relative to their working groups. Thank you for all those. We're not going to do the big roll call here about what's happening. Thank you for Paul for pressing us to not have that. But we would want to give working group chairs an opportunity if they think that there's something to say at the mic, they want to raise attention. Please line up. The floor is yours.
Okay, I lied. I am going to say something. Just technically, SATP is on this slide too. It's not actually a security area group. It's an apps, but Paul's still the AD, so it's confusing. And you can leave it up there, but just you may or may not want to remove it.
Thanks, Wes. Paul and I, for everyone's kind of benefit, Paul and I help chair a number of working groups also in art. In that same situation as SAP is also SCIM and Tigris, but we embrace and love all the working groups that we chair. So this is a little bit of something we negotiated with the community where there was concern that there was security expertise needed in art things, and this was something that was really top of mind, that we embrace them and include them in the fold here to make sure there's appropriate awareness. But good point, Wes. So last call, are there any working groups, working group chairs or participants in the working group that want to come up to talk about something significant that SAAG needs visibility on? Okay, not hearing it. We'll ask the same question. There are also a number of other working groups that are working on key security topics, but perhaps not chaired by Paul and I, so they are on this slide. And they're happening. Would someone like to come up to the mic to talk either about those working groups or things in the IETF, or perhaps through liaison activities you're doing with other SDOs? Yes, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Farrell. There's a new research group formed about usable formal methods, which has like a pile of security stuff. So if people are interested in that, it's largely building off the work that started out with TLS 1.3, and trying to see how that kind of thing could be more broadly useful or made better. So the usable formal methods research group, if you're interested.
Thanks, Stephen. Wes, coming back.
Sorry, Wes Hardiker, ISI, and the ICANN board. The ICANN is starting their process of deciding how frequently to roll their DNS keys for the root zone, as well as potentially doing an algorithm change. There was a meeting this week that I unfortunately was conflicted with myself, but they are taking public comments, and certainly this group would be the right group to read what they're proposing and think about what they're offering.
So Wes, is it non-obvious? Where is it very obvious? I'm sorry, to submit to kind of submit comments, or how would
If you
one
go
do
to
that?
HTTP at, no, I don't know the URL. Paul might go for it.
No, actually, I was going to negate both things that you said.
Oh.
Paul Hoffman, ICANN staff as compared to ICANN board. So the current KSK is being rolled, but there's no open discussion of it. It's already been announced. The algorithm is being considered for rolling. There's a design team happening currently. They will, in the future, probably a couple months from now, have a public discussion of how future rolls might, algorithm rolls might happen. There will be an open public discussion at that point. We will certainly publicize and such like that. After those comments come in, nothing will happen for like a really long time. But we will at that point want public input on the way that they will decide which algorithm to roll to and how they will roll. But you'll see that, but not for at least a few months.
Okay, thanks so much for that clarification, Paul. Any other hot topics that are happening across the areas? Okay, in that case, as we opened with we're talking about ways you can help, we would wanted to kind of publicly thank and show the list of some of the new working group chairs, folks that have stood up and are willing to serve. We said we had 4 new working groups. That requires leadership in 4 different places. So thanks so much, Sophia, Paul, Claire, Wes, John, Karen, Margaret, and Valerie. Next slide. And that could be you, so let us know. We had 1 non-working group mailing list formed. So in preparation for the Key Transparency BOF, we made the Key Trans mailing list to support that discussion coming into IETF116. No one came up to the mic to talk about the Key Trans BOF, but the top line summary is that was a non-working group forming BOF to talk about key transparency. We walked out with a strong consensus that in broad strokes, we in fact understand what the problem statement is associated with that. There was also strong consensus that this is an area in which the IETF should be working. There were preliminary design properties, requirements, kind of hand waving a little bit about what a solution kind of would look like. So there was a base kind of set that it appeared that we had consensus around. There were a few that we didn't fully kind of have consensus on. And so the next step coming out of that BOF was to take all of that input, nail down what that rough problem statement was into a crisper set of words, to codify some of those design properties and put that into a charter and bring that to the list and kind of discuss and kind of see where we are based on that. And that's going to be happening on the Key Trans mail list.
And note that it is actually keytrans@ietf.org. We did not get our own IETF top level domain.
It's trying to spend those LLC dollars. Paul and I have a number of documents we've agreed to 80 sponsors. So just what you see up there are where those various documents are. Practically since the last time we talked, the numeric IDSec considerations document went to the RFC editor, and the IPsec-ME IPsec key document went to RFC. Those others are in some version of review.
Yeah, actually, the E2EE document did see a revision that had like a large amount of changes to make it like sounding less academic and more IETF-like. So if you haven't read the latest version, please go ahead, read, and comment on the SAAG list, please. But I will remind people soon too.
Yeah, as a general reminder, what AD sponsored means, that means these are documents that Paul and I are personally moving forward through the process. They are not products of the working group. So as an artifact of not being a product of the working group, they don't get review unless we hustle for it or it goes through the IETF last call process. So if you have spare cycles, these would be good documents to put your eyes on, because it's either going to be us last call or IESG review before they go out. I mentioned when we started, these are the new slides. I mentioned when we started that we are a little behind on errata processing, and you can see the rough trend since we started laying eyes on this at IETF113. The number of errata is slowly kind of ticking up. The number that we are closing is exceeding the number that's being reported. They fall in two buckets, roughly 60-40, where about 60% of them are actually with working groups that are active, and about 40% are actually a lot harder because they are related to documents that no longer have active working groups. So a plea again to TLS, LAMPS, OAuth, ACME, EMU, and IPsec. Your documents have all sorts of errata that should be looked at. Say again. It's very possible it doesn't make sense.
Is it possible that you have the closed and reported numbers backwards because, you closed 3, opened 16, and the number went down, it looks like? Oh, no, they're up from the bottom. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, I would like to be in the situation you're in where the number is dropping, but it is in fact not. Okay, next slide. So these are just pointers. Pointers we have. The top one is something we reiterate a lot and are open to feedback. ADs look at a lot of documents every 2 weeks during the telechat. We like to flag in coordination with the security directorate things that we commonly flag on that may block the processing of that document. Those common issues, it's about 11 or 12 of them, are captured at that URL. Paul and I also get a lot of questions on where's my document and what are you doing with it? What's the next step? If you want to have deep insight and look at the same dashboard that we look at about what we should be working on, our tick list, so to speak, those are the two URLs you can dereference, and that'll give you a sense of what is where and who's running point, which one of the two of us that it's there. I should point out that IETF is in the middle of a wiki migration. I believe the migration has actually occurred. And so we have two wikis. We have the old legacy track wiki that I kept here. And then there is, in fact, wiki.ietf, which is where the content will all be. We are a little bit behind. All our content got migrated over, but there's a bunch of formatting we need to fix, and it's a little bit of a mess. So between now and 117, we'll get all of that cleaned up. Next slide. Okay, so to close, we want to say a huge thank you to the security director review team and anyone, the members of that sector review team that provided review since we last got together are listed there. Thank you so much. We can't underestimate the value of those independent reviews as those documents are approaching publication. Without really kind of hyperbole, the buck really stops with the final review the ISG does, but the step really before that is the sector making sure that there was some review that occurred on those documents, and they are a foundational basis of how Paul and I look at those ballots. So the time you put into this really improves what we publish in a very profound and a very specific way. So thank you for all that work. And also wanted to acknowledge Teru. Someone has to assign those review of all those documents to all of those people, and that's what he does every 2 weeks. So thank you for administering this process for us. Okay, with that, we'll kind of pause. First, are there any questions about any of the administrative stuff we kind of talked about or what's happening in the security area? We'll pause here. We have this topic, and then we'll have, of course, open mic as well. Not hearing any, so we'll move to the next item on our agenda. Sophia, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for giving us an update.
Thank you very much for inviting me to give this presentation. Sorry for not being in person there, even though I'm in Tokyo, but I'm doing several conferences at the same time with several levels of engagement, so it has been a little complicated. But basically, the idea was to give a report from the Real World Crypto Conference, WC 2023, that happened at the same time as the IETF. It ran from Monday to Wednesday. So yeah, I cannot control the slides. So next slide.
Yeah, we wanted to ask, do you want control, or do you want us to flip through it?
I can control if that's okay.
Absolutely. With embarrassment, we're looking how to give you control. Thank you, Rich.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so let's go into the actual presentation. So mainly what I will be reporting on what happened in real world crypto is what I think that is going to be most relevant or the most relevant talks for the IETF. But of course, bear in mind that there's probably some bias on this because it's also the talks that I have found more interesting. But if you actually want to learn more, the IRCR has a YouTube channel where the videos of the full program have been already been uploaded, so that you can rewatch them there. Or if you want to actually check the slides or the program, I also listed those into this presentation. I also served as a PC member this time of Real World Crypto 2023, so I also knew a little bit more of the talks ahead of time. Also co-located with Real World Crypto, there were two workshops. There was a workshop that was called Real World PQC, and another workshop that is happening right now, which is called Hacks. The first one cared deeply about putting post-quantum cryptography into the protocols that we have. And the second one is mostly about concern about what it means to have high assurance into the implementation of cryptography that we have nowadays. So both of them were quite interesting. Okay, so I've divided this presentation into basically the talks of the 3 days and which ones are kind of more interesting for the efforts of the IETF. So the first one is more concerned about the post-quantum cryptography migration. We had a presentation from Google, specifically from Stefan and Sophie Schmidt, and they talk about a little bit what is happening right now at the Google level and how they are migrating their infrastructure to use post-quantum cryptography. And what they basically reported is that they have been prioritizing mainly in the confidentiality part of the different protocols that we have. And specifically, they have been trying to migrate a protocol that they call ATLS, which is a version of mutually authenticated TLS that fits their needs. And they have been basically looking at migrating into that. So they are basically looking into encryption on transit, but also on signatures where the public keys are hard to change. So for example, in the roots of trust, on migrating all asymmetric cryptography, and also migrating symmetric cryptography but with less priority. During the migration, they reported that they found some problems. Specifically, they found some stack overflows because this happens because some of the post-quantum algorithms that have been targeted to be standardized have bigger parameter sizes when compared with classical cryptography. And therefore, these in turn meant that they had stack overflows. And the way that they solved that is basically moving them from the stack to the heap. Another thing that they reported is that prior to actually starting migrating their infrastructure, they did perform some benchmarking, but they did a benchmarking from the local side. And when they actually put it in production, they realized that it didn't match the benchmarkings that they had locally because the CI benchmarkings were completely different from the local ones. So this basically already gave us some pointers that if we are actually going to migrate post-quantum cryptography in the real world, it doesn't only apply to having local benchmarks, but actually with real world data, it seems to be that is the most accurate representation when we actually try to do a post-quantum migration. If you want to learn more about it, I invite you to look at the slides of the presentation. Another interesting talk was more concerned about bugs at implementation level, and the presenter presented a tool which is called TLS Anvil, which is basically a way in which you can indeed check all of the different implementations of the TLS protocol, like for example, OpenSSL or Boring SSL, and automatically check them against input vectors and also the RFC. And this has been much better to actually find implementation bugs of the TLS libraries instead of relying on manual checking of them, and that way actually having bugs every year found on the different TLS libraries. So if you are interested in actually learning about this more automatic testing of TLS libraries, I put the tool on the slide and also the presentation from Usenix about this research. Another interesting talk that is heavily related to the IETF is an analysis that the researchers of this slide did of the protocols that are used to generate the key session key for the OSCORE protocol, which is RFC 8613. And basically what they focused specifically was in the construction of MAC-10 sign. So what this actually concerns about, as we might know in the room, is that basically the idea was to design a secure communication protocol for constrained environments. And this is difficult because low-power devices support only a limited set of cryptographic primitives, and also because IoT secure protocols might incur minimal bandwidth and round-trip time and power consumption overhead. So as we know, the IETF proposed the OSCORE protocol, which is how to actually define how to securely communicate in these devices, but with the assumption that the session key has already been generated. And the Lake working group actually consents and has a document into how to determine how to generate such a session key. So the researchers basically what they did is that they took this drop and the technology that currently is being proposed at the IETF, and they perform a security analysis of it. And as I specifically told you about, they care quite a lot on the MAC-10 sign approach, because this is kind of a new approach from a cryptographic perspective, because in cryptography, usually what you do is that you first sign and then you MAC, as it happened, for example, on the TLS protocol. So they were really interested on that, and they did an initial analysis of it, which you can find in the paper that I link on this slide. But they invited for more future analysis from all of the researchers on the room. We also had on the day one a really interesting invited talk, which concerned about a new protocol that WhatsApp has for their encrypted backups, that you can read again on the link that I have put on this slide. And basically what they wanted to do in WhatsApp is not only have protections on the transport layer to provide confidentiality, authentication, and integrity by using the Signal protocol, but they also wanted that the same properties should also hold for the backups of the different messages that you have in the conversation. And what they decided to do is that there were two avenues to actually have these backups, basically by having a master encryption key or by using password-based. And they indeed went into the route of using a password-based approach. And for this, what they did is that they use the opaque protocol, which is currently under standardization on CFRG at IETF for actually registering of the password. And they have an initial white paper, and they are actually actively rolling this out, but they again invited some more research into actually their white paper or the usage, which can serve as a great research area for CFRG. And finally, I think this is the final slide on day one. Some common theme on real-world crypto is that a lot of attacks have been happening this last year on different protocols and in different cryptographic primitives. And these researchers indeed did a security analysis of a protocol that is called the Mega Protocol, which is a protocol that concerns about cloud storage. But the presentation did not only concern about the specific attacks, but also what it means to have end-to-end encryption in cloud storage. So one of the things that they did is that they also analyzed all of the possibilities that exist out there to have cloud storage, and they realized that to a level, none of them actually provides end-to-end encryption, as I put in this slide. So one of the few ones that actually provides this end-to-end encryption is the Mega Protocol, which actively has 10 million daily active users. But they found that they have different problems. For example, the problem of key management, how you actually store the different keys or send them between different devices in order to be able to retrieve whatever the data you have in your cloud storage. If you use passwords to solve this problem, then again, you have maybe the common problem with passwords, that they are easy to forget and they are also easy to leak, in which maybe a solution will be to use opaque, because this is a little bit more harder to, the passwords by using opaque are a little bit more harder to actually guess and perform a brute force attack and a dictionary attack. So that could be one of the solutions. But then indeed they looked at the Mega Protocol and found some attacks. Specifically, they were able to recover all of the keys and also all of the file recovery keys. And the reasons were actually really simple. Most of the times is that they use ad hoc cryptography, and they forgot, for example, to add integrity into their algorithms by not using, for example, authenticated encryption, or by using a really old mode of AES as AES ECB. And you will see in some other of the slides that I have that this is a common thing on real world crypto that was presented, that there was this analysis of all of these ad hoc protocols, and that the majority of attacks found on them were like really small cryptographic mistakes. Again, if you want to learn more about it, I invite you to follow the link. So what lessons do we actually have for the day one? First, of course, we have the post-quantum cryptography migration that seems that indeed has been started, but it's started in a slow pace. And what it seems that really is working right now in this industry, rather than just changing all of the infrastructure from one day to the another to use post-quantum cryptography, rather to have a really organized, careful approach, seems like the path ahead. But sometimes not only that is enough from a local level, but you actually have to test first with real data to see that all of your benchmarking, all of your memory allocations and implementation considerations are enough in order to actually migrate your architecture. Attacks seems to still be found even in protocols that we consider very secure, as for example, TLS. It is true that TLS from a specification level, specifically TLS 1.3 from a specification level, is very secure and has had a lot of analysis, but there still shows up a lot of bugs from the implementation level in the majority of the big TLS libraries. So again, researchers now are proposing novel ways to actually do automatic testing to check again not only the RFC, but also known input vectors. And again, as I said, there's a lot of attacks that is happening, especially in ad hoc cryptography design. And what the community also asks, at least from the standardization bodies, is that when we actually think about end-to-end encryption protocols, specifically around secure messaging, that we should not only focus on the transport side of this protocol, but also on what it means to a system to actually achieve encryption, authentication, and integrity from, for example, the backup level or from the cloud storage level. So a lot of researchers actually called out for active effort to standardize such a flavor of those protocols. And that's basically day one. Now we go a little bit more from day two. There was a really interesting session in actually what it means to put cryptography out there in the world and what it means actually to design for end users. So there was an active effort from the 3 talks that I have listed into this slide to actually rethink how we design cryptography and not only have the assumption that we know better or we know the security and privacy properties that users need, but rather to go to those users and different demographics of those users and actively ask them what is the properties that they actually need and design based on that. So there were a lot of cryptographers actually calling out for more user studies of cryptography, more design study from that, and also an intersection between sociological and anthropological research. I also would like to point out here that tomorrow we have the HRPC working group session, and we invited one of these authors to present at a working group. So if you're interested in actually knowing how you design cryptography, for example, for grassroots organizing, specifically for activists working in Black Lives Matter and other activisms against anti-abortion laws, I invite you to join tomorrow. A really interesting talk that while it's interesting to the IETF, it doesn't have that much impact into the protocols per se, but maybe it's interesting to think about it, is that some researchers actually looked at the Michaelis-Schnorr generator, which is a generator to generate pseudo-random seeds. And they looked at it because if you read the specification from NIST, you will figure out that things doesn't look that right, and that there seem to be some points that point out that there might be a backdoor into this specific generator, the same way of what happened with dual-EC DRBG. While they started the avenue of research, they have 90% accuracy that there could be a backdoor, but they don't have the 100%. So they're still actively looking into that. And one of the questions that the authors actually asked to the audience, and I guess also to the IETF here, is that if you know of a protocol or an application where the Michaelis-Schnorr generator is being used in practice, that please let the authors know, because it will be good to actually warn them that there's a high percentage of probability that there's a backdoor in that specific seed. If you want, again, to read more about it, I invite you to read the paper. Finally, as I said, one of the themes that we had on Real World Crypto is that there was a lot of protocols that currently were attacked, specifically on the secure messaging area. One of that protocols was this protocol that's called TREMA, but there has been other that over the year has been carefully analyzed, as for example, the Matrix protocol or the Bridgefy protocol or the Telegram protocol. But the others that did the cryptanalysis of TREMA also presented that. And what they found out is that the majority of times there seems to be problems with actually using secure libraries. So what it seems to be that the designers do is that they took very famous cryptographic libraries, for example, libsodium, NaCl, and also libsignal, and they implemented that. But it seems to be that in the way that they are implementing and the way that they communicate to other protocols, that there is where the attacks are being found. So and again, this is a kind of a call to action that is not enough to look just at the protocol at the transport level, but also how it interacts, for example, with private contact discovery or with backups or with the cloud storage mechanism, because it seems that there in that interaction that the majority of the attacks and security vulnerabilities have been found. And an interesting talk that I know is of interest of the IETF, specifically the MIMI working group, was about interoperability and end-to-end messaging. It's basically kind of SOK, a survey of what it means to actually achieve interoperability in end-to-end encrypted messaging. And the researchers divided the considerations to have an interoperable system like that into 3 paths. The first is, of course, you have to consider identity interoperability and discovery, which basically concerns how you're going to be managing your keys. Then the second one is about messaging protocols. For example, if you use a protocol like Signal and then use another protocol similar to it, but with some different security properties as the Matrix one, and if you use then another one as TREMA, how they're going to be interacting with each other. And finally, also how we're going to be preventing abuse in this kind of system, specifically in regards to the current trend of actually trying to check for system, for example, on different types of protocols. So this could serve, and this paper could serve as a good conversation to also have at the MIMI mailing list. So lessons on day 2, basically there was first that we should rethink who we design for as cryptographer, but also people that design systems and protocols, and that maybe it's not enough to only think about one category of users, but rather to actually go to many demographics and many populations of users and ask them specifically what kind of needs they have so we can design for them. Backdoors, while this comes from the ghost of Dual EC, and we thought that maybe that was away from us, it seems that there's a possible avenue of attacks there and that they still exist. So more careful consideration on them should be taken. Again, there's a trend of having attacks on practice, specifically between cross-protocols attacks. And interoperability and secure messaging is still on its early stages, so a lot of researchers are just looking into what specific consideration we should have when designing interoperable secure messaging. And finally, we have day 3, which is the one that I didn't highlight a lot of talks in this presentation, because the majority of the talks talked about novel cryptography that, while interesting from the cryptography level, maybe it doesn't have yet some applications at the IETF level, but eventually in the future that will come. But something very interesting is that a lot of researchers presented new ways to actually achieve formal verification and formal implementation, which might be of interest of IETF, especially because of the new usable formal verification working group that was just created. And this seems to be a trend that now finally formal verification and formal implementation is usable in practice and can be deployed. So it seems to be that, for example, even the new tools can be integrated into the workflow of different programming languages, so you can indeed check your protocol in a much more easier and faster way. And one of these examples is the one that was presented, which is called HackSpec. Another really interesting one, I know that the IETF has not yet standardized any kind of zero-knowledge proofs, but currently there has been a rise of interest of that, specifically in blockchain applications, but also to maybe attest certain information about encrypted data. There was one presentation such as that, in which what they wanted to propose is to use zero-knowledge proof for fighting disinformation. So one of the things that is happening now, especially from the Coalition of Content Provenance and Authenticity, is that they have been trying to come up with a system that allows you to tell you if an image was properly generated from a specific source, so you can maybe pinpoint or detect when an image has been modified or belongs from a campaign of misinformation. So what they propose is that instead of using signatures as the proposal from C2PA once, instead of using that we should use zero knowledge proofs in order to prove content provenance. But there was a little bit of a debate if it is indeed something that we want in practice to have, or is it still something that we must debate from a more political level. And again, if you want to learn about it, there's all the links on the slide. So just to recapitulate, again, on day 3, there was a lot of novel cryptography, specifically these uses of zero knowledge proofs. There was a lot of presentations about threshold cryptography and how we can use it in practice. I haven't highlighted that here yet, but that might be of interest of the IETF in future years. NIST also presented a new call for standardizing threshold encryption schemes. So there seems to be on the rise to actually have good threshold cryptographic algorithms. And again, this seems capable to solve really challenging problems, but we still need more research and consideration needed, specifically if this is the technology we want to push forward. And something good that I'm happy that is aligned with the IETF is that formal verification is finally landing, and it seems to be usable and now implemented at the core level of the different programming languages. So it's really easy to attest if your cryptographic algorithm or if your protocol is indeed behaving in the way that it's supposed to be. Here at HACS, there has been a lot of conversation, for example, into integrating things as this tool that is called HackSpec into the drafts of CFRG to check that whatever implementation of your algorithm closely matches the RFC drafts from CFRG. So that can be also one avenue to propose to CFRG. And with that, that's the report. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, but I will also be there tomorrow in person if you want to talk more in person. So thank you.
So we're clapping in the room because that was unbelievably thorough. Thank you so much for doing that. I think many of us in the room actually wanted to be there, but it almost felt like we were, given that you honed in exactly where things might be of interest. So thank you for doing that. And also, this was very timely. I know it was very hard. You're still managing other things during kind of the event. So thank you for summarizing that for us. I think the audience is very appreciative of that. There are folks in the mic line, please.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Kuzubi Sako. This is my second time participating in IETF, and
Welcome.
I served as a general chair of RWC 2023. And I want to say a word about excuse on the collapse of this timing. RWC was supposed to be held every January, but because of COVID, we couldn't do it last year. So therefore, we were planning for January this year, but we have to postpone. And these 3 days were only days that we could hold it, among other restrictions. So I took this to steering committee, and they confirmed that for future conferences, we'll make sure there won't be any collapse. And thank you all for.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for considering all the interorganizational kind of dynamics. I mean, the things that at the event are really so relevant to us, as Sophia was just pointed out for us. Are there any questions for her? All right, with that, another kind of big thank you, and thanks for also putting in all the pointers so we can follow up on a number of these papers. All right, with the agenda, this brings us to the open mic time. Is there any issue, comment, or topic anyone would like to bring up? We'll ask again. Is there anything anyone wants to talk about on the mic before we conclude? Chris, you're on the queue. It's okay. You don't need to punch it in the app.
Okay. Yeah. Chris Wood. Sort of a vague question that I'm hoping people here can entertain for a little while. How do I phrase this well? There are some protocols and some technologies that the IETF specifies that receive a tremendous amount of feedback, review from people within the community and also outside of the community. So TLS 1.3 is a great example of this. We spent a long time trying to make sure that it was like correct. It met the desired properties that we all agreed like authenticated key exchange protocol should have. And I think we made a promise to ourselves that we would try to, reapply the lessons that we learned in that process to other things that the IETF specifies. However, I think just the scale of things and the number of things that this community produces is just too much for like security practitioners to keep up with and researchers to keep up with. And so we're in this situation now where we like recognize the value of formal analysis, but we haven't been able to apply it at the scale that the IETF needs. And the answer to this has been, or the way we've dealt with this is just to then kind of to push documents through regardless sometimes of receiving formal analysis. Like some things sometimes we'll have like security considerations that we, think do a reasonable job of like covering things that are important, but some protocols, legitimate security protocols, go through the process now after 1.3 without formal analysis. And I'm wondering if like, that's the right state we want to be in, or if maybe we should try to slow things down a bit, maybe do some more work to pull in people who can do this analysis and help us out. I do not know what the right answer here is because it's a tremendous coordination problem, but I just wanted to observe the fact that, there are things that are being published today that I don't think met the same or achieve the same level of analysis that we would like them to have. And that seems like a problem that we should, as a community, try to fix. And I don't know if this is the right venue for that, but there was silence at the mic, so I figured I would ask it here. Curious to hear what people think.
Thank you, Chris. There was a question we did ask the SAAG community at the last meeting, and I think we got mixed results. We certainly did not hear consensus at the mic that we should start forcing formal methods on, and we couldn't even wrap our arms around what would be the universe of things that we would even consider requiring it on. But,
for sure. And I think like achieving that sort of consensus would be incredibly difficult. And maybe this is something that the new formal methods group can help us with, like making these tools more easily applicable by people in this room who might not be experts to like, bash their protocols with them to get them into shape. But sometimes like, the hard challenges are not like applying a tool. It's like asking the right questions. And, while there are people who are like deeply steeped in the technology that we specify, they might not have perhaps the right or the perspective that's necessary to ask those questions correctly. Like, what does security actually mean for this protocol? Or what does privacy actually mean? I wish I had like a better answer here, but it seems like a pretty kind of systemic problem that and it was discussed last time. So it seems like people are aware of the problem. I just I don't know what to do.
thanks. Justin, you're up next.
Hi, Justin Richer. So one of the drafts that I'm working on in HTTP has been the focus of some analysis, and definitely there's been a call for it's been sort of under the umbrella for this as part of this call for formal analysis. And from my opinion, like I welcome it as a tool that we can apply. I still don't think it's something that should be this like, hard gate that protocols must go through in order to pass. And the reason for that is that with that draft, we actually recently had a researcher point out some problems, not in the protocol, but in the examples of like what we were saying the protocol that the HTTP signing protocol could be used for as just part of our storytelling. And a researcher approached us and said like, hey, according to our model, that's a terrible idea, and here's all of the reasons why. I thought this was fascinating that this came up, and so I approached somebody that I know has done a number of formal analysis models on different protocols and stuff. Sat down with him and sort of ran through the results, and his response stuck with me, and that was, our model never would have seen this. And I think that that's a really important lesson for this community. Formal analysis is not a single solution. It's a method, it's a wide family of things that can be applied. And to echo at least how I took the previous comment, asking the right questions is absolutely vital to this, and getting the right answers out of things like this. TLS 1.3, I think, benefited immensely from formal modeling because we had many years of experience of what TLS looked like and what we expected from it and how people had attacked versions of it in the past. All of that knowledge went into not just the modeling, but also what we asked the model to tell us. And for new protocols going through, we don't necessarily know all of those questions ahead of time. So I would be afraid of getting a false sense of security when one particular formal model does an analysis and says, everything's fine. And then somebody else finds another problem that model never would have seen because the model is asking different questions. All of that to say, I'm hugely in favor of formal analysis being available to this community. I think it's fantastic, and I think we do need to do more of that. But I stop very short of saying that it should be required for protocols for publication for these reasons.
Thanks. Mike?
Mike Ainsworth, formal modeling ignoramus. Is there a way to get more education on this? I'm sort of asking because I don't know what the current tasks or what that IRTF group is doing. Is there going to be like workshops at future IETFs to share this knowledge around so we all know what we're being asked to do?
Would the
here?
chairs of that group like to come to the mic and tell us about that? Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Farrell. I don't think Jonathan's here. He's probably off at one of those workshops. We don't know. We had a first meeting this week. Certainly one of the goals includes education and trying to figure out ways to make things useful. But it's early days. We're hoping that a bunch of the people who were involved in TLS 1.3 and similar analyses seem keen on doing things. There's a bunch of people who seem keen on finding out more, like yourself, I guess. And yes, part of it is kind of trying to figure out ways to kind of make people better informed and try and find ways of using these kind of formalisms in other protocols, not just cryptographic ones. So we'll see. It depends. If people are interested, then get involved and we'll figure out what to do. But there won't be any miracle answers, though. So,
Paul
Hoffman, following up on no miracles. To answer Chris's question, why isn't this happening more? Some protocols are much more attractive than others. TLS 1.3, very attractive, very widespread. I work at ICANN. I mostly work on DNS, the butt of most jokes these days and such like that. We are much less likely to get some of the small resources that are available for doing formal analysis on ours. The new protocols that, which is where we would really like to see that, have a harder problem because they can either oversell themselves about how important they're gonna be. And let's face it, almost everyone in this room has worked on a protocol thinking it was going to be the hot new thing, and it just fell on its face. And we don't want to spend the limited formal analysis resources on those, but we don't know which ones to do it on. And so until we have more of those resources available, I think we're going to see that they will go towards the glossy and probably quite correctly high value protocols like TLS 1.3, like MLS, things that are really looking good. And so this might be 5 or 10 years down the line, and we might get formal analyses later that go like, you missed this whole thing, even though you're well established now.
Good point about resource management. Chris.
Yeah, just one final comment. Yeah, thanks for bringing up the message signature draft, Justin. And it's a good example of like how formal analysis in this particular case helped us sort of improve confidence in the thing that we were specifying. Because like you took Dennis's work, you like update, or you're going to update the examples as far as I understand it, and like that. Great. It's just like another mechanism that we have at our disposal in improving the confidence of the things that we specify. Another way is like writing tests and like doing experiments and stuff like that. So I'm not suggesting at all here that like formal analysis is the one true way by which we establish our confidence in a protocol. It is a tool that complements the other things that we have at our disposal and that the IETF does already pretty regularly. I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on it as a complementary tool. That's my humble request.
So we'd close the queue because it was actually getting pretty full, but since it's empty now, we have 5 minutes. If anyone else has anything, please feel free to come to the mic.
Hi, Yoav Nir. I'm the chair of I2NSF, and I2NSF is going to close, well, when we finish the couple of documents that are, I think by now in ISG review.
On the telechat, April 13th.
Right. So there are proposed more documents, but we're not going to we're not going to keep the working group open, but there are proposed documents. So what we told the authors was to go to the SEC dispatch list, and just want to be clear on the fact that SEC dispatch is an ongoing process, and you can ask questions of what to do with this draft on the list. You don't have to wait for this 1 hour of SEC dispatch meeting 3 times a year, but the dispatch is an ongoing process. So I'd like to see if everyone is okay with that statement, because I don't see a lot of activity on the SEC dispatch list, except that, oh, I want to bring that up in the next meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, if there is a mailing list that folks need to use that has broad eyes, we do have SAG. If the key focus is around getting a dispatch result, SEC dispatch is absolutely appropriate. We have not done it in some time, but it is even possible if there is a backlog of demonstrated interest on the mailing list that would benefit from a virtual interim, it is possible to do. Again, haven't done it in some time, but it's certainly possible based on that backlog, and that's something that Paul and I would coordinate with Rifat and Kathleen. All right, I think that's it. All right, you want to close it?
Okay, so with that, we're at the end of the meeting. Thanks everybody for coming, and let's make the internet more secure.
Hi, how are you? Good, you?